Thank you so much for talking to us. This is a slightly peculiar, unusual way of doing an interview. We are living in very unusual times at the moment. I wanted to start off by asking you, what have been your reflections of the impact that this pandemic has had on our country?
Well, as I've tried to say in one or two messages to different groups of people in this country, I can't tell you how much I sympathise with the way everybody has had to endure this unbelievably testing and challenging time. And I know that so many people have had the agony of losing their loved ones, and the bewilderment and anxiety that surrounds everything. And so it is the most awful aspect of a pandemic like this, and yet we've seen at the same time people being quite remarkable, and wonderful people in the National Health Service and all the other key workers who've kept everything going. And that is the remarkable thing about this. It always produces the best in everybody in so many ways, and that, I think, is something which is so special about the reaction. But at the same time, we have to make sure we try to do better in the future.
It's been remarkable to see the community spirit that has really come out right across the country. But what do you think it has taught us about our priorities? What really matters in life at the moment?
Yes, well, I think more and more people perhaps have begun to realise that all sorts of things we never really thought about, perhaps as much as we should have done, are absolutely crucial. For instance, as I've tried to say for, I don't know, nearly 40 years, that we have to put nature back at the centre of everything we do, and put it at the centre of our economy, which is, before this, nature's just been pushed to the peripheries. We've exploited and dug up and cut down everything as if there was no tomorrow, if it didn't matter. The problem is, of course, it does matter, as some people have been trying to say for a long time. The more we erode the natural world, the more we destroy what's called biodiversity, which is the immense diversity of life, plant life, tree life, everything else, marine life, the more we expose ourselves to this kind of danger. And we've had these other disasters, with SARS and Ebola and goodness knows what else. All of these things are related to the loss of biodiversity. They're called zoonotic diseases, where you end up with these diseases being transferred from animals to humans if you over erode the natural world. So we have to find a way this time to put nature back at the centre, and that is the way in which, if we live in greater harmony, we can find a much more sensible form of economy.
It's fascinating what you say there, because I know that we've spoken in the past about your concerns that if we don't act now, we are going to see more natural disasters. But you're also saying there that we could see more pandemics like this?
Well, this is what so many of the scientists who understand these things have been trying to say for a long time. And I mean, it's one of the reasons I tried to get the point across that we should have been treating the planet as if it was a patient long ago. So no self-respecting doctor would ever have let the situation, if the planet is a patient, reach this stage before making an intervention. Hence, the precautionary principle, which seems to me absolutely essential. And also, learning from all those indigenous people around the world who understand these issues only too well, and also understand that certain things are sacred, if you see what I mean. But we've removed all that sense totally from our scheme of things, and I think we're slightly paying the price as a result.
How concerned are you that if we don't take radical action now, we could see another pandemic like this? Many people never expected to see anything like this in their lifetime.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I am extremely concerned. It's, again, why, when I went to the World Economic Forum gathering in Davos in January, I was trying to outline a 10-point action plan for how to do all these things better now. And since then, since January, of course, the situation has got far, far worse. and we have countless millions of people around the world in incredibly difficult circumstances, millions out of work all around the Commonwealth, let alone anything else. And the economic impact, let alone the impact from the pandemic, is immense. So the point about it is, how do we create a better system? There's all sorts of things that people have been trying to say for a long time that we could do much better. And these are the things that we have to concentrate on now, it seems to me, in order to work our way out of this, but in a far better and more sustainable way that actually puts a green recovery at the centre of all this. And the great thing, if I may say so, is there's more and more consensus building around what needs to be done now. And suddenly we find people taking interest who never did before.
In your Earth Day message, you talked about how this has been a really unique opportunity, like no other in many ways, where we have actually been able to stop, pause, reflect, and reset. You alluded to some of your thoughts there, but what do you think are the key priorities, the key themes that we really need to be looking at in a post-COVID world?
Well, first of all, we need to work at how do we create the kind of recovery that benefits people, helps to get people back to work again, provides real employment around the world. And that can be done, of course, by prioritizing certain things that haven't been prioritized before, which is to recognize the damage being done by CO2. And this can be done in a way that raises enormous amounts of money. It's already done in certain countries. I mean, in the EU, for instance, they raise 40 to 45 billion euros a year from just charging a price of 24 euros a tonne for carbon. If you increase that price, you could use that money to help fund the build back in a better way, if you see what I mean.
I was going to ask you, it seems like a very long time ago, but in January you launched the Sustainable Markets Council. A lot has changed since then. Is it now time to rip up the rule book, or are you still feeling confident that that could be a good basis for a global economic model going forward?
Yes, I think it can. I mean, I've been, as I think I said before, I've been absolutely amazed by, well, the transformation that's taken place in the last year or two in terms of the financial services sector and the capital markets sector suddenly taking an interest in sustainable investment opportunities. I mean, I tried 12, 14 years ago with trying to bring in as many pension funds as we could to look at long-term sustainable investments, for instance, in green bonds, in saving the rainforests, all these things which are absolutely key to our survival. But every time we thought we were getting somewhere, somebody said, oh, but who's going to underwrite the risk? The trouble is the risk has increased 150-fold or more. So we now are faced with a mounting crisis. So fortunately, people are wanting now increasingly to invest in a sustainable way, in a way that actually produces and rewards best practice and doesn't worst practice. We've got banks, we've got people like JP Morgan, with other leading banks, are now saying that they will change their lending policy to companies in the oil, gas and coal sectors in such a way that they won't loan the money unless there is carbon capture and storage built into their operations. So even big, fossil fuel companies like Shell, BP and ExxonMobil are all now recognizing that these externalities need to be addressed, and that's why even they are saying carbon pricing is something that matters, because the big fossil fuel companies are part of the solution.
I understand that you have been pleased to see that when people have been talking about a post-COVID world, there has been talk about a green recovery. Do we need more examples of governments encouraging businesses with incentives like we've seen in the past? Be more green, And we will back you up. We will help you in these difficult times.
Yes, and there are some very good examples around the world of this. The thing is, of course, that as I was saying earlier, you have to deal with the many perverse subsidy regimes that exist, whether it's again in fisheries or forestry or agriculture. At the moment, all that's happening is that so much money is going into doing things in the worst possible way. So we're actually shooting ourselves in the foot most of the time. It's not rocket science to reorientate those perverse incentives to be beneficial incentives. For instance, there are all sorts of things that could be done. All sorts of companies and governments are saying that they're aiming for net zero by 2050, which sounds all marvellous, but then there are at the moment, most of them don't have particular targets. They don't have to report on this at intervals to show what is actually happening. Simple things like that could make a fantastic difference, so that shareholders, consumers particularly, because people should remember that the consumer has an immense role to play in all this. And more young people are concerned, as they have been for many years. At last, there is a chance, because all these companies I've been talking to and I've been trying for 38 years to encourage corporate, social and environmental responsibility, with only a few really in proportion to the huge number around the world taking any interest. Now suddenly more and more really are, and they want to know how to do it. So there are people coming to my Sustainable Markets Initiative to help and support.
Do you appreciate that there is a fear that maybe this crisis has made individuals less receptive to sort of visions of change? Many people are still at home. They'll be watching this thinking, well, I'm still concerned. My family could get ill. I'm concerned that I don't necessarily know whether I'm going to have a job going forward. What would you say about that?
Yes, but I totally understand all that. And the point about all this is that whatever happens, and if it does happen, the most important thing obviously is to make sure the economy can function again, and that people's livelihoods and their businesses and everything else and employment is possible. All these things are going to have to be incremental anyway, but the point is that in order to avoid even worse situations in the future and more disease, and we have to find a way to ensure that within the next 10 years, because otherwise we will lose this battle against accelerating climate change and global warming. Because if we go on like this, with temperatures rising inexorably, then the whole of life becomes increasingly impossible.
Do you fear that you will be frustrated again, that the sort of global world will not come together? We've seen in some ways countries have closed their borders, countries have become more inward looking. Are you fearful that will increasingly be the case as we move into a post-COVID world?
Yes, there is always that risk and always that danger. But I'm encouraged by the apparent level anyway of willingness on the part of many people to look at this differently. The problem, as you identify, is that we can't be certain that other countries will. But those that really want to do it properly will forge ahead anyway. And many will get left behind, it seems to me, in an increasing backwater economically and in other ways, without understanding the need to adopt this more integrated and holistic approach.
How much will you be pushing for global leaders to step up now and come together at what is a time when actually many countries could feel disjointed and be quite inward looking as they try and fix their own economies and get out of this pandemic as individual nations?
Well, I haven't exactly been wasting my time during this lockdown, if you know what I mean. So I've been, in connection with all sorts of people. I've had the opportunity to do a lot using this technology. I have been communicating with a lot of people around the world on these issues. I've been talking to leaders in the Caribbean, which is chiefly Commonwealth countries, and they are facing immense challenges. I was talking to the Prime Minister of St. Lucia recently because he wanted to talk about the horrors facing these countries and islands where the tourism sector is disintegrated completely. They're under the most appalling economic pressure. They've also got the risks and dangers of every year of hurricanes. When they hit, how do they recover? They're always in debt. And these are the issues that simply have to be addressed on a global scale. There is the Pacific Islands as well, many of which are Commonwealth countries. All these small island developing states are absolutely critical. So this is another reason why I was trying 5-6 years ago to help build a Commonwealth green finance facility, particularly to help these islands. These are all the sort of things that now, because we've got this catastrophe on our hands, suddenly, as so often happens, it's only catastrophes which concentrate the mind, which means that for once there might be some real impetus to tackle all these things which have been pushed to one side, because everybody said, oh, it's irrelevant. You know, for instance, you could never get the G20 to concentrate very much on agriculture, forestry or fisheries because it wasn't considered very sexy. But these are crucial things.
You'd say there this globally has affected everybody, and it's affected everybody in very personal ways. For example, you had the virus yourself. How much did that motivate you to look at what can be done next and where we go forward?
Yes, it makes me even more determined to push and shove and shout and prod, if you see what I mean, and whatever I can do behind the scenes sometimes. But yes, I mean, I suppose it did partly. I mean, I was lucky in my case, and got away with it quite lightly. But I've had it, and I can so understand what other people have gone through, and I feel particularly for those, for instance, who've lost their loved ones, but were unable to be with them at the time. That's, to me, the most ghastly thing. But in order to prevent this happening to so many more people, this is why I'm so determined to find a way how out of this, in order to bring the world and all of us back to the centre, back to understanding what we have to do in relationship to the natural world.
I think what has struck me is that there's been, in some ways, a great sense of nostalgia, people wanting to go back to how things were. I think ringing in everyone's ears is that phrase, "We'll meet again," the Vera Lynn song, but also used so powerfully by Her Majesty the Queen in her message. Will life as we knew it ever return, and should it?
Well, as I was saying, yes, I mean, a lot hinges, doesn't it, on finding an effective vaccine. And I mean, I know there are a lot of people working on this flat out. And some reports say they're very optimistic. Well, that would revolutionize things. But I think the point about all this is that, as I was saying, what we need is to try and rebuild people's hope. We don't have to stop doing everything. We can come back, but in a far better way that enables us to have something very much approaching normality. But for instance, there's a lot of work going on, to ensure that we could produce sustainable aviation fuel for the aviation sector, biofuel made from waste. There's huge potential in the second and even third generation biofuels, which could transform the situation. I visited the Whittle laboratory in Cambridge earlier this year to see what they're doing there on aero engines and the complete transformation of and design of aircraft wings, for instance, based on what's called biomimicry. So they looked at, can you believe this, at the fins of whales moving through the water and how they do it without reducing the friction and they've been looking at how do you design aircraft wings to mimic natural things like whales or whatever. And it is remarkable what can be done, but we have to bring the investment that's necessary to do all this. There's huge potential in this carbon capture and storage. We have to do that if we're going to win the battle to keep global temperatures down, to enable life to continue and to enable biodiversity to continue. Because if we go on doing it, we create all these endless diseases and problems because we've destroyed the biodiversity. So there is real hope in doing it better and differently, as many people have been trying to say all these years. But it'll be a new way, but it enables life to come back again properly.
So there is hope, but we're looking at a new type of normal, as people are just desperate to see their families, really, aren't they? It's a challenging time.
Well, I mean, I haven't seen my father for a long time. He's going to be 99 next week. And so, yes, all my grandchildren or anything. So I've been doing, well, the FaceTime is all very well.
How has that been for you, being disconnected from your family, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I mean, it's terribly sad, let alone one's friends. But, I mean, fortunately, you know, at least you can speak to them on telephones and occasionally do this sort of thing. But it isn't the same, is it? You really want to give people a hug every now and then.
Yeah. Yes, I suspect you're not the only one who would love to be able to embrace their relatives, and hopefully that time is coming very soon.
Well, I do hope so, because, well, I don't worry, I totally understand so many people's frustration, difficulties, grief and anguish, and I mean, I'm just trying to do my best to find and help encourage ways to enable people to go on doing that, but in a way that doesn't wreck everything at the same time around us. We can do it if we try.
It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. Thank you very much for taking time, and hopefully we will all meet up again in the ways that we usually do. So thank you very much, sir.
I do hope so. Anyway,
Thank you.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Thank you.